Welcome to the Hello Sunday podcast with me, Nikki Hayden. This is the podcast that discusses everything self-development, spirituality and sobriety. And it wouldn't be me without a little sprinkling of humour. Whether you are just starting out on your journey of self-development or have been exploring these topics for years, are completely alcohol-free or just curious about living a more sober lifestyle, this is the podcast for you. Each week, I'll be exploring topics in both solo episodes and with some amazing guest experts. So if you like what you hear, then please subscribe, rate and review. So with that said, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Hello Sunday. I hope you are really, really good. I have got an absolute treat for you guys today. I've got a phenomenal guest on. She is a 43-year-old mother of two, married to Gary and living in Dublin in Ireland. She gave up alcohol almost 6 years ago now, and her life has been completely transformed. She's gone on the most seismic healing journey, is happier than she's ever been, and even went back to university to study alcohol and now works as an alcohol-free mentor, helping other people to lose the booze and live more empowered and happier lives alcohol-free. Welcome to the podcast, Olivia Farrelly. How are you?
I'm great, and thanks for that introduction. It's amazing to be here, and I love the name of your podcast, Hello Sunday, and so I do a lot of workshops on Sundays and Sunday mornings because that's the day we get back when we give up alcohol, and it's just Sundays become these magical, fun-filled, freedom type days when they used to actually keep us prisoner in our own bedroom or on the couch, So
exactly that. Yeah, I got Sundays back, and it's now, like you say, you get a whole other day. Like it's a whole other 12, 16 hours of your life. And I tend to use it now. I do fun stuff and family stuff, but also then like just prepping for the week. Like I used to wake up on a Monday cloudy headed and not being able to think straight, and it was lunchtime before I'd even kind of made a list of what I wanted to do that day in that week. So yeah, I'm glad you like it, glad you approve.
Yeah, it's
super. Well, Olivia, I'm so excited to have this chat with you. It was actually another guest of mine, the lovely Faye, who we had on a few weeks ago, who I know came on your podcast. And that got me looking into you and your incredible journey. And I just knew that my listeners would get so much value from hearing about how you kicked the booze, because let's be honest, it is, as you've mentioned to me previously, your greatest life achievement. So let's take it back to, I guess, sort of your experiences of growing up around alcohol and just a bit of a backstory around kind of why you chose to give up the booze.
Yeah. So I began drinking kind of very similar to a lot of people. And I know a lot of your listeners will know this as well, because I've had a couple of people on my podcast and they say it's all around 14. So I started drinking at 14. I had 3 drinks when I was 14 and then turned 15. And listen, didn't drink a whole pile, the usual kind of teenage drinking, like experimentally. I went to live somewhere for the summers when I was 16, 17, 18 and 19, and we spent all summers drinking. We worked in a hotel, we had a really active social life, that kind of thing. Went to university, drank the head off myself for definitely the first 2 years, and then calmed down in third year when it kind of mattered and I had to do exams and deliver a thesis and all that kind of crack. And so I was 20 finishing that. But like my drinking was always around sociability, connecting with my friends, experiencing something new. And I had a social anxiety, as every human does. Like the more I engage with people, everyone suffers from shyness in certain situations. Everybody suffers from social anxiety. But it was a beautiful way for me to kind of quell that kind of angst that I had. Certainly when I started going out and being around people and new experience and all that kind of thing. Went to Australia, drank myself around the country, moved to England. Actually, didn't really drink a whole pile there. I did a master's over in Stoke-on-Trent. And didn't drink there because, again, I didn't have that many friends there, and because I moved over on my own. So again, that kind of reiterated to me that I drank with my friends and to be social. Came back from England and probably was drinking too much then, I'd say. So I got a kind of a serious enough job and spent every weekend out, kind of looking to meet somebody, and it had gone from being social to maybe having to go out, like to meet a partner or whatever. So met my husband, and his name is Gary. He has a nickname. We call him the Gary Llama because he is just this really stoic, kind of calm, regulated, beautiful man. And so met the Gary Llama anyway, but I was a bit chaotic at the time. And so when his calm and my storm met, we were kind of this nice kind of pairing. But anyway, he really kind of regulated me and calmed me down. And I suppose I was ready for that change. And then got married, had kids. And I think probably having kids was really the catalyst, because now we weren't going out the same way as we had when we were single and young and free. But because your sleep is disrupted and because your life is just so completely different, I couldn't drink in the ways that I used to. As in, I couldn't go out with my friends and have 10 drinks, and then wake up the next morning and tend to a baby and a toddler, So it was definitely a very incremental thing. Like, I'll say that I absolutely had incidences from when I was 15 onwards where I knew I probably shouldn't be a person who drank. But I always got so overexcited by alcohol. I was always so enthusiastic about it. And I always kept giving it another chance. So like I gave it chance after chance after chance, even though it absolutely annihilated me, and it made me, like, it brought me to the depths of hell, I suppose the drinking of it was always kind of okay, but it was the hangovers that really got me, Mm-hmm. And I kind of drank it. Now, I believe anyway, and like, I suppose my opinion is valid because I live in this body, but I don't think I was ever addicted to alcohol because I never felt the need to drink. I wanted to drink because I had built up habits and behaviors in which I, liked drinking, but I was never addicted to it. Like, I never felt that I needed it physically, maybe psychologically. So just to kind of cope with different nights out and stuff. And I suppose then I never needed it to cope. So I never needed it to cope with big emotions or huge stressors in my life. So it was a lot of it was about connection. So what age was I? Maybe in my mid-30s. So probably 35, 36 when I had the kids. And it kind of, incrementally dawned on me that it wasn't, so that it was taking more than it was giving. So I had a dream, and this dream kind of instructed me to take 400 days off the booze. So I took 30 days off the booze and then went back drinking. And then a couple of months later so I was trying to moderate, and like this whole kind of, oh no, I'll see if I can just have 2 or 3, but whatever way what joke. So whatever way my brain is wired means that 1 is never enough, and was never, and I can safely say will never be enough. Now, I intend to never drink again, but I know full well that if I had 1, it would lead to at least 6. That's just the way it always was for me. 1 beget 10, So anyway, we went to a wedding in Spain. It was the first time we went away. The kids were 3 and 1. They were at home with my parents. We felt like we had we were reliving a certain point in our relationship. Went to Gary's cousin's wedding. It was wild. We were like free pouring gin in a nightclub till 6 a.m, drinking cocktails at 12 in the day, all this kind of stuff. But I mean, I got a toxic dose of alcohol over those 3 days. Woke up, had a panic attack, was full sure that I was going to die. I mean, like, I know that sounds very dramatic, but I was in the bed having such a panic attack my heart was palpitating. I literally thought that was the day that I was going to die. I was going to leave 2 little kids motherless at home. And I was like, alcohol has brought me to the point where it's going to kill me. You know, the intensity of the feelings that alcohol leaving my body had generated, you know? So, so pure panic, got ready for that wedding, didn't even have a shower because I was feeling so bad, you know, went to the wedding, fell asleep in the wedding, right? It was because I was so hungover, and like I actually did get a second wind after that sleep. But like you would think that I wouldn't drink that day, but I did. So like I had a pina colada and I'd wine with the dinner, and then I had a couple of gins, and then just something very intensely, I call it divine, because now I can look back and see that it was a power greater than me, came upon me, and just I had this unbelievable urge to say, that's it. Now, if I look back, there was like it had built up to this point because alcohol had ruined me on so many occasions, you know. So I handed Gary the gin on this mountaintop, and I said, this will be the last drink that I will ever drink. And I handed him the gin, and he was like, all right, okay. And it actually was, you know, because something came over me, and there was this unbelievable determination that I don't think I've ever seen. And that was 6 years ago now in July. But it's been just the most incredible journey in those 6 years. It's been life-changing.
And did Gary actually think, yeah, fucking right, whatever? Or did he actually believe at the time that was going to be your last drink, do you think?
No, Gary believes nothing I say because I talk absolute shit all the time. Like I make all of these resolutions, and like I'm very dramatic and I'm very expressive. So I say things all the time like, oh my God, I'm going to do this. And I have a really short memory. And then he goes, what about this? And I go, oh yeah, I forgot I was doing that. So it actually, I think,
relate.
So I think the biggest surprise for him was that I actually followed through. So the next day then when we were leaving the hotel, Russell Brand's book, Recovery or something like that, was on the table. So I saw that as a sign. And then I read Catherine Gray's book that day as well. And for me, because I had experienced such horrendousness with alcohol for a long time, you know, all the self-loathing, all the guilt, all the shame, all the really bad negative experiences that I felt within my own body. Not like, so like I have a lovely job. I have a great job, always had. We have a gorgeous home. We have a really good relationship. Like nothing was on the brink. Like I wasn't at rock bottom. I was just a woman who was drinking like every one of her friends, every one of the mums that I knew, every one of the people that I grew up with, everybody in the society that I live in, cocktails and fancy wines and Prosecco, and like there was nothing down and out about my drinking, but the after effects of it were just so intensely negative and felt so bad within my body that I think critical mass had been reached. You know, I just said, I'm done. And it actually turned out that I was actually done, and very, very done at that point, you know.
For those of you that are regular listeners to the show, or maybe you know me personally, you won't have been able to get away without hearing me talk about Simprove. Simprove is a scientifically backed, water-based probiotic drink. You drink it daily, and it has been scientifically proven to help with things like bloating, IBS symptoms, pain. It was actually a dietitian friend of mine that introduced it to me last year, and I honestly wouldn't be without it now. It's helped with my energy, with my bloating, it's helped with my immune system, and also things like my skin. The list is honestly endless. Now, I have got a code for you. So if you'd like to try Simprove, you can get 50%, that's a massive 50% off your first 3-month subscription by going on to simprove.com and putting in the code Nikki50. That's NIKKI 50, or clicking the link in the show notes. Amazing. Yeah, I think it was actually the Catherine Gray's first book, The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. I'm sure it was her book where she spoke about people's reactions to alcohol actually like scientifically being different. So like my husband, for instance, he could go out on a big drinking session. He'll feel tired the next day. He might feel a little bit like he doesn't really want to do anything, but he never ever feels the way that I felt. He doesn't have that same reaction of physically being sick and feeling the crippling anxiety, and it's a completely different reaction. And I just always thought that, you know, oh, I'm obviously just a bit of a lightweight, but actually it's scientifically it's your genetics and the way you're made up, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I know people who don't have hangovers, and like,
Yeah.
I suppose traditionally we would have called them lucky, but they're kind of not, because their body doesn't signal to them that they've taken a toxin. So they will never know, you know, how bad it is, you know, because obviously we know now that it causes a lot of health harms internally, and there's lots and lots of research coming out about that now. But I now look back, and those horrendous hangovers where I would vomit for up to 12 hours. Now, I mean, vomit for 12 hours. And I mean, like, have panic attacks and feel the lowest that I have ever felt. And it's so funny because like the apathy and the languishing and, you know, the self-destructive nature that, you know, begot me then, I've never experienced anything like that. So now my mood is very level. I'm really energetic. I'm really positive, annoyingly so. Like, but it's just the benefits are so intense, you know. I had somebody on my own podcast the other day, and she said something to me that absolutely blew my mind. And it was like, as she looks back on her career of drinking, she realized that alcohol did it all for her. So it made her brave. It gave her confidence. It knocked her out of its shell, right? And it does the same for all of us, right? And when she told me that, I was like, this is blowing my mind. And then what happens when you remove it, you have to relearn all of those social skills. You have to learn to be brave. You have to learn more and more about yourself and become the person that you've always meant to be. And the gorgeous joy for me was like stepping into this new version of myself, just like Olivia 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever it is, but having the joy to do that with such clarity, you know, knowing that this is the person who I was always meant to be. And I think, you know, comparing that to the maybe meek and, you know, unconfident version of myself beforehand, now I was grand, you know, but having kind of got this incredible sense of myself and done a lot of inner work since that, now it's just such a gorge. Because I know the comparison of what it was to be in that body. And now I know that when I go to bed, it's always peaceful. And that when I go to a wedding, I won't wake up having blacked out the night before. It's just, it feels like such a joy. It's a new lease on life.
Yeah. And isn't it ironic that you used alcohol to give you a false sense of confidence and to beat social anxiety, but then actually the anxiety that you got from drinking and the hangover was 10, 15 times worse than probably what just facing that first, and let's be fair, the first probably hour of being in an environment where people are drinking, if you're sober, is the worst in inverted commas until they've all got a bit pissed, and then no one cares anyway. So that social anxiety that you build up so much, if you can just get over that initial kind of hurdle and feeling, it beats then not waking up the next day and feeling like you felt like, you know, panic attacks and everything.
Oh, yeah. Like it feels like you win the lotto. So if you can just get through that first hour, and that's what happened. Like I work with a lot of people who want to remove alcohol. And the biggest fear that they have is like going for dinner with these friends who they've been drinking with for 25 years or going to a wedding. Like, Jesus, the weddings. Like we put ourselves under so much pressure for weddings, right? And, you know, maybe you just don't like weddings. You know, that's what I say to people. You know, you don't have to go to the weddings. But weddings definitely seem to cause a lot of trouble because either people really, like it was a wedding myself that got me off the booze. And I've worked with a lot of people who they went to a wedding and there was a free bar and they lost the run of themselves and they did this, that and the other, and they woke up at a blackout and they made all these mistakes. And then there's such shame and all these kind of things. But like going to a wedding sober is actually, you know, it takes a bit of practice. You know, if you learn how to dance and all those kind of things. But going back to what you said, so I've discovered this part of me now. I'm fairly dramatic, as I said, but like I'm quite confident. But I noticed then this part of me emerged that I really like. So I am quite sociable, and you do have to put a little bit more effort in, but to kind of try and convince people that you're still the same and that you're still good fun, and to kind of eradicate that belief that sober people are boring. But we're not. We're just people who just choose not to drink because it really affected us,
Exactly. And actually, I don't know what I would find more fun about losing my memory and waking up without my phone and not knowing what I've said to people. Like, all of that is completely eradicated. So it does piss me off when people use but it's boring thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting better. I do think, from personal experience, that I've been really lucky, actually. My social circle generally haven't been judgmental, but I know people who are still too scared to kick the booze because of perceptions and because of how other people have treated them when they've even mentioned it.
Yeah.
You seem like quite a confident person now, but how difficult was it being in those first few social settings when you'd originally given up alcohol, and how did people receive it in your life?
So I gave up initially in 2017. So that's like 7 years ago. And then I went back on it. I drank for a couple of times after that, but it was a totally different cultural environment, right? So there was, I doubt if people were even using the term socially sober curiosity, or, it was very different. There was only Catherine Gray's book and Jason Vale, Kick the Booze. That's what I read as well at the beginning. And a couple of Australian books, a girl called Maz Compton, and she called it the Social Rebellion. So that's where I kind of looked at the very beginning, and Lucy Rocket as well. So they were the kind of people that I had kind of looked at. So there wasn't a whole pile. So I pretend drank for, I'd say, for the big social situations for ages. So I would go out and, Gary would get me what looked like a gin, but it wasn't. Or I would, even if somebody poured me a glass of wine, I would just pretend I was drinking it. I'd just do the motions, and then they'd all be
really?
so pissed.
Wow.
Yeah, they'd be all so pissed around me that they wouldn't even know. And then I'd drive them all home afterwards, and they wouldn't even know because they wouldn't even remember. But no, I did a bit of that, pretending and just bringing this kind of extra personality there, and then saying to them at the end, I wasn't drinking tonight. I don't know. I felt like that was a way to keep me safe. And I had done that in the early stages of pregnancy. Like, I know my friend had a hen when I was only a couple of weeks pregnant, and I pretend drank for that night. And then I suppose that's what gave me the idea to do that. But then the benefits of being alcohol free became so intensely positive, and I became so confident around my decision, just because my life I had such clarity that I was like, I don't give a shit. I'm not drinking. I'll probably never drink again. So suck it up, people. And then people, I'm sure people at the beginning were like, oh, this dose coming in here telling us she's not drinking. But after a while, people just get used to it. And what has happened that I've seen now is that a lot of my friends have, have given it up or have thought how they drink. So they're kind of looking at their own drinking, and nobody really is drinking in the way that we did in our 20s. No. Because we're actually not able to do it, because physiologically our sensitivity increases and our tolerance decreases. So we're not actually able to do it. But there's definitely not the same culture of massive drinking that there was then. But yeah, no, it was physically, it was very easy for me to give up alcohol, but I suppose socially not so much. But once people got used to it, it was a whole different ball game. And now, obviously, I have an Instagram page and I have a podcast, and they know that I'm really into it.
Yeah, you're serious about this. I mean, 6 years down the road, I think they've got to get the idea. Yeah, and I do think that even regardless of age playing a part, and maybe you alluded to earlier, having kids, and I've got friends and family members that have had kids, and they're like, I'm just not gonna mix alcohol with having to be hungover and look after them. It's just not worth it. But I think regardless of that, I think generally the culture is changing anyway, because I know people that have gone to university and this whole sober fresher event, that was not a thing when I was at uni back, 20 odd years ago. Like you just wouldn't have found a sober bar, a sober night, a sober anything. There was probably people that didn't drink much, but it was generally a culture of you go out, you get absolutely blotto, and you do that 3 or 4 nights a week. And actually now I think even outside of my age group, your age group, we're all kind of seeing that change as well, which is brilliant. And I think social media has played a huge part to that.
Absolutely. And you know what the gorgeous thing that I have a girl who's 7 and a boy who's 9. And the thing that I hope that they have, and I see other kind of young people like older of drinking age, they have a choice. They know they have a choice to drink or not. I don't know about you, but I never felt like I had a choice. If everybody was doing it, so I have a saying around this, and it's like, how does a fish know it's wet? How does anyone know they have a problem with alcohol when everybody around them is drinking like them? And I suppose it's a big statement to say that you have a problem with alcohol, but I did have a problem with alcohol because alcohol created problems in my life, and it created problems in me. And now, because I have a 6-year, gap between the last time I had a drink and now, I have created a level of safety within myself where I can admit all these things, so I can admit to doing X, Y, and Z, and I can admit to having shame about that. But because I've done a lot of the work and I've done a lot of healing work, that all that shame has risen to the surface, and it's been healed and transmuted, and it has left my body. And, I can talk freely about it because it doesn't have the hold that it once had over me. And again, as well, because I know people have universal experiences. So I was on a call with a woman the other day, and she was like, I have so much shame, Olivia. And I was like, it was like I was in a jar and I was actually pickled in shame myself. I understand shame. And she goes, but no, not shame like me. And I was like, absolutely shame like you. Like, we all do the same things. Like, I doubt if you murdered anybody, but I'm sure everybody has done outrageously shameful things when they're drunk. But it's not you, it's the alcohol. You're not in control of yourself when you're drinking. So, and we really internalize that shame and the self-loathing and the guilt. And I think that's what keeps people stuck, because they feel that, how could I ever not feel this? All in a very deep unconscious way, maybe. But, I think, and definitely some of the groups that I run, like the group mentoring, the greatest thing that people get from them is connection to other people. And what it is as well is knowing that you're not alone. Because when you think you're alone, it creates such loneliness and such shame. And you lack the kind of motivation to do something about it, because it has that hold over you.
Definitely. And I think it's such an important point that you don't have to have a drinking problem, but if drinking is causing problems, whether that just is really bad hangovers that are causing anxiety, whether you're blacking out and doing things that you regret, or, you don't want to look at your bank account or your phone the next day, that is a problem. And the fact that we as a society have just normalized it because it's taxable and it's been going on for centuries is wild to me. Absolutely wild.
And when you really kind of do a deep dive into it and all the kind of marketing and advertising, I was 3 years in before I read Anne Dowsett Johnson's book, Drink. And I remember being so raging. I was like, oh my God, we're just consumers, and they just want us to drink, and they just want to make money out of us. And just around the shame. So I'm going on a work lunch tomorrow, and we're going to a bar in Dublin. And I haven't been to that bar since I was 24. And I got alcohol poisoning in that bar.
Wow.
And I'm going back to get
a blast from the past.
And I had to take a week off work with anxiety because I was so in bits. So that's a nice full moment, as in, we're all so redeemable. We can all, change who we are. And, I teach a lot about visualization and early sobriety. And once we kind of visualize and have this, version of ourselves in our head, that we can do all these and keep all these things to kind of gain perspective on who we want to be, you know. And for me, I had this vision of myself when I was a kid, and I always wanted to be like a strong, wise, powerful woman, especially in my 40s. So I'm 43 now. Like, and nobody is like a finished painting, are they? We're all a work in progress all the time. But I'm getting closer and closer to that kind of version of myself that I wanted to be, you know. And absolutely giving up drink has been the catalyst to that, you know, all that kind of emotional regulation work and all the inner healing and the meditation and the journaling and, you know, the letting go of being a people pleaser and putting up boundaries and, you know, all that really kind of healthy psychological stuff as well.
Yeah, and that's so important. And I do want to talk more about that, because I think for me, the biggest thing that I see a lot is people that want to break that cycle with alcohol or want to change their relationship with alcohol, and they think that just giving up the booze is going to solve all their problems. But actually then what happens is the big emotions come up, maybe trauma that they've not dealt with, that they've been self-medicating with, or like you touched on, just, you know, the shame sometimes, and then it perpetuates that cycle, because then they drink again to push those feelings down. And actually sitting with the feelings and being in, you know, your rawest emotional state without anything masking it, it's really fucking hard. And if you've not done that before, and since the age of 14, 15 probably in this country, you've been drinking in social situations, there's so much that comes to the surface. And what I tend to find is people will say, oh, it's not working for me, it's not doing what I wanted it to, or what I expected it to. But actually it is. It's just that they're not giving it long enough, and they're not prepared to sit with that. So it sounds like you've done a ton of healing work. What are some of the tools and the self-development work that you've been involved with that you found, I guess, the most helpful for you?
Yeah, so I did a lot of so I'm the self-help queen, right? So I love a book, and my background is psychology. So I have a degree in social psychology and a master's in health psychology. So I always relied heavily on psychological theory to help us kind of heal from different things. So I read a lot, and actually one of the books that I adored, and I have all of her books, and the workshop or the workbook is Dr. Nicole LePera, How to Do the Work. So
amazing.
If you read, amazing. You know, her Instagram page, everything she says is so deeply profound. I'd be like, Gary, listen to what Nicole is saying here. Are you this person? And he's he's just like, oh, shut it, you. But like a lot of her work, and just buy her book. Oh my God, she talks all about like emotional regulation and future self journaling and healing from trauma and regulating our nervous system. And there's loads of things that you can do to regulate your nervous system, so that we can kind of not be in fight or flight, but we can be in kind of rest or repair mode. So exercise was really big for me. So I went absolutely nuts at boot camp. So I was doing a lot of HIIT, so like that high intensity stuff. So I realized when I gave up the booze, that I'm outrageously competitive, but I'd always been so lethargic caused by boozing nearly every weekend, definitely in my 20s. So I went hell for leather in the gym, and like I'd go through the wall to win. Like I'm just like a beast for winning. And that's something I never knew about myself. So I loved that. Did a lot of meditation. So all that kind of really, a lot of Joe Dispenza meditation. So read a lot of his books, did a lot of his meditations, all that kind of, you know, really regulating the nervous system, a lot of emotional regulation. So looking at what I get triggered by. So right, what are the things that annoy me so much, and why do they annoy me? And again, like you said, it's sitting with the big, massive, overwhelming feelings. And I tell people, become a detective in your own life. So shine a light on what annoys you, why does it, and then kind of trace back, where do you think that comes from? I see a therapist every couple of weeks, have done for the last few years. I'm really into alternative therapies like Reiki and kinesiology. So I did a lot of that. I do a lot of like sound bath healing. I have spiritual healers dotted all over the country. So like what I saved on going out and bottles of wine, I absolutely spent on all these healing modalities. But that's what has made me feel good. That's what's kind of regulated me. That's what's caused this kind of emotional and spiritual growth that I've experienced over the kind of past 6 years. But yeah, just listen, I've worked in kind of social settings for the last 20 years with young people and people with all kind of different, problems and stuff. So the biggest thing and the biggest catalyst for pain in humans is overwhelming feelings. So when these massively overwhelming feelings come, people don't know what to do with them. So they can't let them sit in their body. So they drink, or they do drugs, or they buy loads of shit, or they go and have sex with everybody, or, so there's all these things, and that kind of balances them out again. But I think, as you said, we really need to sit with those emotions and explore them, and obviously they're there for a reason and they've developed over time, but it's getting curious about yourself and the reasons why you drank. Why did I drink? For me, it was about connection, and well, at the very beginning it was to kind of quell a social anxiety, then it was about connection, and then it was just habit and connection. Like we all drink either to start feeling something or to stop feeling something. So it's just about getting to know yourself so well that you kind of discover why it is that you drink,
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody said to me a few weeks ago, oh, what is this bloody trend of everyone giving up alcohol and suddenly turning to spirituality and climbing hills and mountains? And you've just summarized it. It's exactly that. It's you quit the booze, you have all this amazing time and energy. The exercise helps no end. And what better way than to get outdoors and explore nature? And then actually the spirituality and the healing work is because the booze was what used to mask the feelings and the emotions. And it's getting to know yourself again, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah.
And it's not a fad or a phase. It's actually something that a lot of people are doing because they're realizing that it's a choice now, and that when we grew up, it wasn't a choice. It was just, in essence it was, but it was never given as one that was available to us. It was always just, you grow up, you drink, you go to uni, you drink, you go to weddings, bar mitzvahs, baby showers, whatever, drink. And, that was the only way that we ever knew. And I think now we're having our eyes opened a bit more, and especially with social media and connection to people all around the world, there's like a new way of doing things that's becoming available to us, and a better way, a much better way.
And it's just, obviously I welcome it, but it's so wholesome and it's so nurturing of our souls, just when you were saying there as well, I did a lot of inner child healing work, right? And a lot of like loving kindness kind of stuff, the Buddhist way. But there's a beautiful book by Dr. David Hamilton called I Heart Me, and he's a beautiful author. He's a Scottish guy, and he's just so gorgeous and kind and soft, and I read a lot of his books. So like I turned to books and podcasts as well to really help me on my journey and to really ignite that kind of daily motivation that I needed. So there's loads, and everything is free, like obviously people would like a bit of accountability and support, so there's loads of people out there who can offer that, but I did it all myself. So I did it out of reading books and listening to podcasts and kind of regulating my nervous system and all that kind of stuff. But that's what I was interested in, when I had kind of done that stuff before. But it's all about getting to know yourself, and cheesy as it sounds, it's getting to love yourself as well.
Yeah.
So, obviously we wake up with ourselves every day, and we're the last person we talk to when we go to sleep at night. So you might as well try and like yourself,
Yeah, exactly. Trying to escape yourself is never going to end well, is it?
Really.
So it sounds like you've had this incredible journey and this incredible healing journey, and I'm sure there's people listening that are thinking, oh, that all sounds great, but have there been challenges? Have there been moments where you've thought, this is really bloody hard? Or have there been moments where you've been tempted by the booze again since you quit 6 years ago?
I haven't been tempted, but little sneaky thoughts have come into my head, like that I haven't, automatic thoughts. So I was walking around Dublin City last summer, and I don't know if wherever you are, but like, when the sun's out, like it's everywhere. When the sun comes out, everyone rushes to drink outside, right?
Especially in Dublin.
Oh my God, especially in Dublin. So I was walking through Drury Street, which is a really nice part, and everyone was out drinking fancy drinks. And I was walking along, and this sneaky little thought came into my head, and I was like, oh, Jesus, why can't you ever drink again? And it was quite derogatory. And then I went, oh my God. So I've kind of learned to attack those thoughts, to catch them, challenge them, and then change them, And I was like, well, I do this because I know exactly how it feels to be the other side of booze. And I prefer to feel like this. And then people that I really respect who have denounced alcohol, as in terms of health consequences, like Professor David Nutt and like Dr. Daniel Amen and the research that they've done. And I kind of thought of them too. And I was like, I really respect them and the work that they've done. So I'm going to stay. But listen, of course it hasn't been. Of course it's been hard. I've been the odd one out at so many events. And it's hard to be, I suppose, the first person in any social group to change a culture. And it has been. And I know there has been, people who have really questioned that. Like, people think that you join a cult, don't they? They don't really understand it until they're in it. And there's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding around people who want to give it up. And then a lot of people thought that I didn't have a big enough problem, and that what was she going on about? But nobody lives in my body. So listen, it would be wrong of me to say that there was that many problems. There actually wasn't. It just felt really good from the very beginning. And it has been the most incredible thing that I've ever done, and the thing that I'm most proud of in my life. I mean, personally, obviously I love my kids and my husband and all the rest, and I'm very proud of them. But for me, because I never really see through a task, so I'd be, oh, I'm grand, and that's the kind of lethargy that alcohol would have given me. But now I'm just so determined, and I have so much passion and energy, and it would be very hard to go back to anything other than these good feelings.
Yeah. And I think as well, if anything else that you were doing consistently in your life made you feel like shit, you wouldn't do it. If you were eating something that bloated you constantly, or if you were, I don't know, doing a job that you just hated, you'd change it. So I don't really understand why it's so difficult for people to understand that you don't need to have been drinking vodka daily or been having a real physical dependency to want to give it up and to want to have a better life and a better way of doing things, essentially. And I've had that as well, when people have said, oh, well, can you not just have a couple, or where they've maybe thought that it wasn't really an issue. And like you, it's not an issue at the time that I'm doing it. It's the next day, and it's the feelings and the shame and the regret and the blackouts and just all of that. And it's like, why would I put myself through that? And then it's the lack of productivity going into the week, and the things that people don't see, the things that when you see your friends on nights out or dinners or get-togethers, they're not seeing that side of you. And so it's hard to, until you really articulate to them and say, actually, do you know what? A peek behind the curtain, this is what I was like. And then they kind of get it then, I guess.
They kind of get it. And that's another thing that I talk a lot about in the work that I do, is personal sovereignty, right? So when do we become our own sovereign being? So when does Olivia, or did Olivia, become 100% responsible for what she did? So why do we drink for other people? Are we going to drink because our sister wants us to drink, or because our best friend from uni who was living in Australia is only home for after 10 years, and we have to drink because that's what she expects of us? But like you said, they never see behind the veil. They don't see it maybe at 3:00 in the morning with that outrageous anxiety. They don't see the lack of productivity, that you're not hitting your goals. We all have little mini goals, whether that be health or fitness or productivity or whatever. And when alcohol is being withdrawn for our body, we're just barely keeping our heads above water in terms of coping with that. So, when are we going to get personal responsibility for us and our lives? And are we going to keep pushed into doing the same thing again and again and again? Or are we finally going to stand up to ourselves and say, no, And like I always say that like our life is always talking to us. It's always sending us little messages, like a little feeling of discomfort here, this little, realization that, oh, maybe I'm not as happy as I should be. And for me with alcohol, like there was signs for years. I'd say there was signs from when I was 15 that alcohol should not have been in my life, and I had so many signs again and again and again, and I just chose to ignore them. And then the time that I actually did listen to it, it has created the most incredible results for me. So I would definitely say, people, start listening to your lives, because you're getting little messages here and there. Like if you're blacking out, or if you're vomiting, or if it's causing problems in your relationship, or if you're just not being productive, or you're not getting that promotion or whatever, maybe it's time just to give 100 days to it, because we give alcohol chance after chance after chance after chance, hundreds of it, and we always say, oh, this time it's going to be different, and it never is. But why not give alcohol free a chance? 100 days, like it's not going to be the worst thing you've ever done, but at least you'll then have a bit of knowledge base to work from. Is it for me? And you will never meet a sober person who regrets giving up booze.
Absolutely. It's doing those little personal experiments, isn't it? Like, what it's like to drink. So why don't you try not drinking and see, how that is? One of my really good friends went out last weekend, actually, and she went to, it was like an event quite far away, and she drove and decided not to drink. And she really surprised herself at how much she enjoyed it, regardless. She did say at first it was a little bit, not awkward, because she knew the people that she was meeting there. I think just normally, like you said earlier, you'd have those, couple of Dutch courage drinks to quell the social anxiety. But the next day she was so smug, and just doing that personal experiment. I've been talking about quitting drinking or changing your relationship with alcohol for a good year and a half now. And it was only in doing that herself that she was like, actually, I kind of get what you're onto now. So yeah, it definitely does make that difference.
Absolutely. And people, that's the thing, they're always so surprised at how easy it is. Like I had a text from one of the girls I was working with, and she was like, oh, I was out for dinner with like my friends of the last 20 years, and I thought it would be horrendous, but it was actually fine. And that's what they say. It was actually fine, and I actually survived, So
Yeah.
like we can do all of these things without a drink. We've just been conditioned to believe that we have to drink Prosecco or champagne at weddings, and we have to celebrate with alcohol, and we have to wet the baby's head, and we have to, because I turned 40 when I'm 43 now, but I was 40 when I was off the booze, like probably 2.5 years at that stage. And people were like, oh, you're going to have a drink for your 40th. And I was like, why would I ruin this absolute joy that I feel like by having a couple of drinks? Because I've known myself so I drank for 23 years, right? And I drank in the same pattern all the time. And it never got any different, and it never will. So I will absolutely never have another drink in my life, because I'd have too much to lose. This is too good.
Yeah, what's the point? Exactly. So the work that you do now then, in fact, let's go back a little bit more than that, because I'm keen to understand what the university course was that you did, and then how that led on to the work that you do now as an alcohol-free mentor, and what that looks like.
Yeah. So so I said earlier, so I have a psychology background, right? So I would have always, so my day job now is I design and deliver interventions, right, to help kids. So that could be emotional regulation, it could be certain skill developments, enhancing empathy, all those kind of things. So when I gave up alcohol, right, I had nowhere to land. And I was a very specific drinker. I was a grey area drinker, I learned in the first kind of year. So I drank in a certain way. So I was kind of, I suppose I was about 3 years in, and then I was like, God, I'd love to help people who feel and felt like me when I gave up booze in 2018. So I was looking for a couple of courses, and my husband went back to university, and I found course in his uni that was alcohol studies. So went back, right? So I was an average student when I went back, right? And this is another thing about alcohol. And actually, I have a friend who's doing a PhD, and he was saying that people who give up alcohol or drugs are academically way better than the normal population. And we were kind of discussing why. Yeah. So I went and I got 100% in absolutely everything that I did. So I got a first in that course.
Amazing.
Now, I had never done that before. So I'd always been very average. But that even, like, I had always had this in me, but the alcohol kept it down, you know, and I released this kind of potential. So did that. And then I was like, right, well, what did I need when I gave up booze? And I was like, well, I needed all of this information. I needed all this kind of psychological information. I needed education. So I needed to know about the health harms of alcohol. So a lot of the course comprises of the health harms, all the recent research. We dissect about people's patterns of drinking, you know, their attitudes towards it, their beliefs around it. You know, we really examine, you know, what was the point at which they felt like it was costing more than it was benefiting them. You know, what did it give them? What did it take away? And kind of really understanding the relationship that you had with it. We do a model called the behavior of change model. We look at how people change behavior and how they sustain it, how to ignite your motivation on a daily basis, what are the tools and tricks, and like we developed their own kind of sober toolkit then. But a lot of it then, so there was standalone workshops, and it's kind of developed now into group mentoring courses. So I'll get a few women together. It's generally women. I do work with men, but they're few and far between. But yeah, so we'll get a group of women together and we'll meet once a week. And again, it offers accountability, it offers support, peer education. And I often say that, you know, when we're looking around the screen, it's like looking at all these nodding dogs because their experience is universal. So when people talk about shame, or when people talk about not hitting milestones or living with shame and regret and guilt and all those kind of things, it's universal. We all feel it because we've all been there, you know. And like I'll get texts and DMs and emails from people and they're like, oh, I'm 150 days or in 200 days and you know, all these gorgeous things. And you know, I even got one today from a lady in Portugal. Well, she's in Ireland, but she was over in Portugal on her holidays, and we've been doing a bit of work together, and she was like, it's finally just clicked. And I was like, we just need to sit around and wait for the click. Like we can do all the work around it, but you know, everybody gets there in the end, and it is a process, you know. So we will stop and we will start and we will slip and we will slide, and it's definitely, I stopped and started my way into it as well. So to know that that's part of the process too, and it's all learning, it's all feedback. You will learn all along the way. But like you had said earlier, you know, it's to sit with those kind of big emotions and to know that they will come, you know. And I call it the dark night of the soul, because after I gave up the booze, I had a massive dark night of the soul, because like I was like, well, who am I? You know, you're stripped bare. You're like, because you are stripped bare. So you have to go to all these events with yourself, you know, this person you don't really know that much.
Just you,
It's just you, because you've always had the crutch of alcohol to help you along the way. But yeah, it was definitely a dark night of the soul for me. I was like, what is my purpose? What am I here to do? Who am I? How can I cope with being me in the world? And then you just, you know, as time goes on, and like I said earlier, the more space that you get between yourself and your last drink, the more confidence you get and the more clarity and the more kind of knowing of yourself and liking of yourself. When I looked back at all the affirmation tracks that I developed since I was probably 8, 9, 10, they were pretty bad, you know, all this constant loop of really bad talking to myself about, you know, being lazy or being, you know, rotten or all these kind of really awful things, and trying to break that kind of cycle of how I think and talk to myself has been a journey in and of itself too.
Yeah, well, it's a lifetime, and you don't realize that actually a lot of the stuff that you say to yourself it's not you. It's because if you're drinking a weekend and then you're not really wanting to put 100% in on a Monday, that's not because you're lazy at your core. It's just because of alcohol. And I think a lot of people don't realize, like when I did my first 100 days, when I launched my business, the productivity that I had was through the roof. I was actually working properly on a Monday morning. And then all of a sudden you build that self-respect and you start showing up for yourself, and the affirmations change, but it's undoing a lifetime, isn't it, of, what you self-talk essentially.
Yeah.
And actually you were saying there about the community and the, I guess just that recognition of your traits and characteristics in other people and realizing that, you're not the only one. And it's actually really interesting because I think the one thing that I did was joined like Facebook groups and followed people on social media. And I guess all of that wasn't really available to you back in 2018.
No, it was very few and far between. Now I know it's massive, like it's an absolute movement now. But yeah, there was very little back then. And that kind of, what you said there made me think of somebody. I was talking to somebody the other night, and she has 8 weeks off the booze, so she's doing great, but she doesn't follow me. She only dips in and out, as in,
right,
she can't commit to hitting the follow button in case anybody she knows sees that she follows me and thinks that she has a problem with alcohol. And I get that quite a bit, actually, and especially in Ireland, when I've done a couple of podcasts in the UK, and people have said, oh, we've loved hearing an Irish voice, but we're so ashamed to like, or no, they don't use the word ashamed, but we're just cautious that if we comment on anything that you do, or if we like, that somebody we know will see it and that they'll think that we have a problem with alcohol.
Gosh, how interesting. Yeah. There's so many nuances, isn't there, with this and people's thinking patterns. And I think, one of the things you touched on just was around the kind of the pattern with alcohol and the dipping in and out and how people tend to do that a lot. And there's a group that I'm in on Facebook, and somebody had actually posted today saying, I'm 18 months alcohol free and I was dependent for 4 years before that. And they got an event or something coming up and they were like, I really want to drink for it. And everyone was just like, don't do it. It's one of those things where if you've not been able to moderate in the past and you've had a dependency, like what's going to be different? It's not. And I think having that community potentially and holding up that mirror and giving their shared experiences was really, really valuable, because I think if that person was dealing with that thought pattern on their own, they'd probably just have gone back to drinking, and who knows where it ends up. So that community, that reflection, that holding the mirror up, I think for me, that's probably one of the most important elements at the start of the journey, because it can feel so lonely, can't it?
Absolutely. And then, because, like I said earlier, like if you're the first person in your social group to begin to change, now you're a culture changer, so people will follow suit, because that's what happens in social groupings. But it's very, very scary to be the first person who does that, and to face the judgment of everybody else. And, we've developed a culture as well that we shame the drinker and not the drink. So like if somebody becomes addicted to cigarettes, it's like, oh, the cigarettes. They don't say, oh, Olivia is a bad person because she smokes and she's addicted to cigarettes. But Olivia is a bad person because she's addicted to alcohol, So like there's definitely, it's very, I suppose the rhetoric and the musings and all the kind of opinions that have come around alcohol and it being a moral issue instead of like being something that's highly addictive. And, people aren't in control when they're drinking, so they shouldn't be judged.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So if there's people listening, which I'm sure there will be, that are thinking about maybe some of the stuff that we've spoken about today has hit a bit of a nerve, or they're resonating with it, and maybe they either want to give up completely or they're just thinking about changing their relationship with alcohol, what would be your top tips or top advice for them?
Yeah. So like I'm a big believer in our intuition, right? So we have gut feelings and we have them for a reason, and alcohol decimates them, right? But occasionally we are able to hear what our I suppose our soul is trying to tell us. So I would say the first thing is to trust your intuition. If you're getting messages that maybe it's for me, right? If you're saying, oh, I think I would like to try something, or you're even being pulled towards sober curious accounts or, quit lit books or podcasts, then your life is trying to tell you something. So go with that intuition, follow it and see where it goes. Definitely give yourself a bit of space. So try 30 days, but we all think that probably 100 is best, because you get a bit of space and time to kind of get clear and get motivated and for the alcohol to truly leave your body. Get curious then, so get your the magnifying glass or the light out so you can have a look at, the patterns in which you drank in. Why did you drink the way you drink? What are the people around you drinking like? Do you feel that you need to drink because they all drink? All those kind of things. So getting really curious about your relationship with it as well. So I would say to read, write, listen and affirm. So read all that you can. Write down all that you're feeling, listen to every podcast under the sun, and because there's lots of them, myself and yours included, and then affirm. So, this thing of having loads of affirmations, and that could go hand in hand with your reasons why. So when I gave up, I had a list of about 6 different reasons, and I kept them as a screen grab on my phone, like my screensaver. And I looked at them every single time that I was checking my phone, which is 17,000 trillion times a day. But it was always like my whys were always affirmed, and I kept getting, they kept getting reinforced, and the further that I got into the journey, the more exceptional that it became. But like affirmations as well, and when we affirm to ourselves that we can do things, we actually can, So set lots of intentions, read, journal all your feelings. And actually, I didn't journal in the very beginning. I'm kind of raging, like I do a fair bit of journaling now, but I would love to read back on those early journals to see how I was feeling. And especially when I had my, dark night of the soul, I would have loved to kind of read back on what I was feeling then. But I had only taken it up probably in the last 4 years, but before that I hadn't. And I think and take pictures as well and look at your progress, and maybe you'll lose weight, and maybe your skin will get better, and maybe you'll get competitive and go through a wall like I will. But you will learn so many gorgeous things about yourself. Maybe you'll realize the dream you had when you were 10. And actually, when I gave up the booze, I think that I kind of went back to a stage at which I was before I started kind of really getting into booze, which was about 16 or 17. And I really embodied that part of myself. So that girl, that kind of innocent girl who had a lot of dreams and was really trusting of the world, and then the world got its hand on me. But and it's all about a healing process too. So give yourself a bit of a break. Stuff will come up, it will be awkward, it will be challenging, but it will be the greatest thing that you will ever do in your life.
Oh, amen. And definitely, I think for me, I've never been a huge journaler. I have persevered with it somewhat, but I definitely wrote down how I felt when I was hungover. I remember doing it one day when I'd been really ill and really vomiting and anxiety, and one of the worst ones that I'd had, and reading that back, because I think it's so easy, isn't it, to say when you're feeling like that, I'm never drinking again, and then a couple of weeks down the line and you think, oh, you forget, don't you? It's a bit like childbirth, I guess. You forget what actually happened at the time. So reading that back for me was so powerful, because it put me back into that emotion and that feeling, and the real why of why I never wanted to do it. And then obviously all the benefits come, and you feel amazing, and your skin clears, and the productivity and all that. But yeah, that real kind of realization of I can't feel like this again. And yeah, like you say, with your dark night of the soul, that would have been probably interesting but brutal to read back, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But look, you've been absolutely phenomenal, and thank you so much for sharing. I know that this is going to be an absolutely incredible listen for so many people. I get messages all the time from people just wanting to understand how much do I need to be drinking to give up? Or, is it something that I really need to do? And how did you do it? And I think we've covered so many of those questions today. But if people do have more questions or they want to connect with you or work with you, how can they find you? Where is it that you sit on the internet, and how can they follow you?
Yeah, so I have an Instagram account called @GreyAreaDrinker. So that's GREY Area Drinker. I have a website. It's www.greyareadrinker.ie. And my podcast is called No More Booze. So I interview people all the time who have given up booze. So just ordinary, regular people who've given up booze and whose lives have transformed, or they have begun to help other people as well. So that is me.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I would highly, highly recommend that you go and listen to the whole back catalogue of episodes, because there's some really interesting stories on there, and from people from all walks of life that are just like you and I, and all of their amazing tales of how they quit and actually what it's given them. So I will link everything in the show notes. But thank you so much. It's been absolutely awesome talking to you. And yeah, I will hopefully chat to you again soon. And for everyone listening, I hope you have a fantastic week. Thanks for listening. You can find us on Instagram @HelloSundayPod, or you can email us on hellosundaypod@outlook.com. Have a great week.